Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from different parts of the world. I'm Cynthia Martin, representing the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary Loreto Generalate at the United Nations, along with Mary Ward International Ireland, Vivat International, and Loreto Community at the UN. It's my privilege to welcome you all, especially our keynote speaker, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason, from the Permanent Mission of Ireland to the United Nations, and our guest speakers, Sister Orla Treacy IBVM, Father Benigno P, Beltran SVD, Helena, Rial, Isaac, and Maria Angelica Solomon. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Directly contributing to the discussions around the High-Level Political Forum 2022 theme, this side event invites all of us to revisit the interlinkages between SDG 4 and 5. A World Bank study estimates that 70% of 10 years olds in low and middle income countries are unable to understand a simple written text as a result of school closing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Further, according to 2021 Global Gender Gap Report, it will take an average of 135 years for women and men to reach parity on a range of factors worldwide. The youth advocate for SDGs recently said, none of us who are here today will be able to see gender equality in our lifetime. Education is the primary gateway to address all other development issues, including gender equality, environmental preservation, and the rest of the SDGs. Faith-based organizations have been playing a vital role before and during the pandemic in ensuring that children continue to have access to quality education. Today, we will hear and learn directly from the leaders of two such organizations and their graduates. Our moderator today is Priya Bhargava, our current NGO Youth Representative Intern. Riya is a past student of St. Agnes Loreto, Lucknow, India. First as a girl delegate and later as a youth representative, Riya participated at the Commission on Social Development, Commission on the Status of Women, the Generation Equality Forums, and has been a part of UN Women's Adolescent Girl Global and Asia Pacific consultations. Riya will introduce our keynote speaker and our guest speakers. Over to you, Riya.
Thank you, Sister, for that enlightening introduction to today's webinar. To understand the world around us, access to education is crucial. Through quality education, people acquire the ability to listen, critically reflect about reality, and make informed choices about their lives. Education is essential to achieve many of the SDGs, or the Sustainable Developmental Goals. Quality education allows people to break the cycle of poverty, enabling them to lead a healthier, longer, and more sustainable life. Despite the steady rise in literacy rates over the past 50 years, there are millions of adults who do not have access to basic literacy around the world, and most of these adults are women. These stark numbers are a reminder of the work that the global community must do to meet the SDGs in the near future. We have with us in today's webinar leaders in the field of education to share with us their experience and wisdom working in the field and their thoughts on just how impactful and important quality education is to achieving gender equality worldwide. I welcome our speakers for today's event, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason, the permanent representative of Ireland to the United Nations, Sister Orla Treacy of IBVM, the Director of Loretta Rumbeck, Father Benigno P. Beltran SVD, the CEO of Veritas Social Empowerment, Miss Helena Rial Isaac, and Miss Maria Angelica Solomon. Before we begin, remember to put your questions in the chat box, and we will make sure to request our speakers to address them after they are done speaking. As our keynote speaker for today's webinar, we have Her Excellency, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason, the permanent representative of Ireland to the United Nations in New York. She took up the position in August 2017 on completion of her term as Ambassador of Ireland to France. She led Ireland's successful campaign for a seat on the United Nations Security Council and was the chair of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women for 2018 and 2019. A link to Ambassador's full bio is in the chat box. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ria. Thank you to all of those who invited me this morning. I particularly want to thank the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Loretto Generalit, and Vivat International for convening us here today with really such an excellent panel. Thank you very much indeed. Before I start, I thought I would share with you that in preparing for today's meeting, the Irish Embassy team in Addis Ababa contacted me. They had heard that Sister Orla was going to be one of the panelists, and they wanted to inform me and emphasize to me the extraordinary importance of Sister Orla's work in Rumbeck. Ambassador Brennan, our ambassador to Ethiopia, had the opportunity to visit Sister Orla in Rumbeck in March and witnessed firsthand the incredible work that she and her team are doing in South Sudan, and in a deeply deprived context, as I understand it, for women and girls, providing almost 400 girls with high quality education, breaking that negative cycle of early child and forced marriage. So Sister Orla, I wanted to tell you that we all join in a huge congratulations to you on receiving the Presidential Distinguished Service Award. And it's really humbling and wonderful to see your efforts and achievements on the ground, and importantly, to see them recognised by our very own beloved President in Ireland. So well done, Sister Orla, and it's an honour again to be sharing a screen with you. Friends, UN member states, along with many civil society groups and a host of other actors, are right now gathered here in New York in person, and of course joining virtually all across the globe for the high-level political forum. This annual gathering it's a hugely important one for us at the UN. It's the platform for taking stock of progress, comparing notes on challenges and successes on sustainable development. Unfortunately, where we are today, 7 years after Ireland and Kenya famously brought the gavel down on the successful 2030 agenda negotiations, is that we're not even at the halfway point towards achieving the SDGs we had hoped for. Without question, COVID-19 has made the achievement of the SDGs by 2030 much more difficult. The clear priority that has been placed on addressing the pandemic over the last 2 years has reduced the capacity of most countries to succeed in reaching the goals, and that's not least due to needs to divert funding and resources that would otherwise have gone to achieving the SDGs. For many countries, we know that the pandemic has exacerbated issues of poverty, unemployment, unsustainable debt, widening inequalities, the very issues that the SDGs themselves have been designed to address. This year's high-level political forum provides a stark enough illustration, I have to say, of the setbacks which have been wrought by the COVID-19 pandemic, the outbreak and continuation, unfortunately, of conflict. I see that on a daily basis from the Security Council perspective, and the ongoing triple environmental crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. If we're to take the opportunity to build back better from the current crisis, I think that we have to be absolutely clear-eyed and accept that we're falling short, even before the pandemic hit. While we were making some progress, frankly, we were far from where we needed to be to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Some targets were on track. Child mortality, primary school enrollment were in a better position, but progress on many others, including eradicating poverty and hunger, reducing maternal mortality, increasing access to drinking water and sanitation, and achieving gender equality, critical targets, had all slowed down before the pandemic hit. Across all countries, women, young people, and children remain the most vulnerable. During the pandemic, some countries have reported a rise in early marriage and dramatic increases, almost globally, this is true, in gender-based domestic violence. Many women, especially mothers, have left the labour market. Many young people across the world are now facing even greater challenges in accessing education, training and jobs, with really increasing levels of anxiety and documented now mental health issues as a result. But this year's HLPF, if I may say, does offer some hope. Countries are implementing innovative solutions and policies in what is a real moment of challenge. Sustainable Development Goal targets are increasingly being integrated into national policies and plans for a sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that's the important point that we need to hang on to now. Ireland will certainly play our part in delivering on the 2030 agenda. We're currently in the process of finalising our second national implementation plan for the SDGs, and our new plan emphasises the importance of greater policy coherence for sustainable development and the need for increased and stabilized, as it were, multi-stakeholder approaches, so more inclusive as well as more coherent. Ireland has also launched its second national strategy on education for sustainable development, ESD, and we strongly acknowledge education's role as a key enabler for the achievement of all SDGs. Education for sustainable development promotes and supports the development of the requisite skills, knowledge, and attitudes, all of which help everyone to take action for a sustainable future for ourselves and for our planet. The ESD strategy spans the continuum of education in Ireland, right from early learning and care up to third level education and research, and extends beyond that even into engaging with local communities and youth groups, and very importantly, in my view, through lifelong learning. Sustainability and inclusion needs to be at the heart of education, with these principles not embedded just in our teaching and learning and research, but also in the way that we manage and the way that we govern our educational environments and our partnerships with local communities. We know that our students are passionate. We see that every day about creating sustainable learning environments, and we need to support them in living what they learn and in taking action throughout their lives. It's vital that we equip our own educators with the competencies to embed ESDP principles and practices at all levels across our education systems, and that people and communities feel that they're empowered to make a real difference in their own lives and cumulatively then to lift the entire operation. The SDGs are also critical to Ireland's foreign policy. We see this in our own international development policies focus on supporting the furthest behind first, and in our consistent support for an effective UN-led multilateral system that delivers coordinated humanitarian development and peace efforts. Just prior to the pandemic in 2020, Ireland launched what we called the Drive for Five. It was a very important education initiative, the aims of which included access to 12 years of free education, supportive schools and gender responsive curricula, relevant education and skills, ensuring that girls are safe from violence, and importantly, keeping girls healthy and in school. We remain very committed to these goals. Last year, we pledged 60 million euros to the Global Partnership for Education over the coming 4 years. And this is a pledge that Ireland will contribute to getting 88 million more children, that's a staggering figure, 88 million more children into school, ensuring that 140 million students are taught by qualified teachers and that 175 million children receive a quality education. This support will help the Global Partnership transform education systems, implementing key reforms to accelerate progress on inclusion, equity, and learning. Reaching the most marginalized children is a real priority for the GPE and always for Ireland. This includes children with disabilities, children from poor and vulnerable households, and the really vulnerable internally displaced and refugee children. In 2021, the UN Secretary General issued a report on how to secure the amazing thought of a breakthrough for humanity through a series of choices to realize a greener, safer, better future. The report represents our common agenda with efforts to accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs at its core. The Secretary General's plan for the UN and how the international community works together is ambitious, and it must be. The 2030 agenda calls for a world transformed, but the future which the SDG seeks to create is becoming more and more distant. Education must be fundamental to our efforts. Appropriately, the first significant deliverable, if you like, from the Secretary General's plan will be the Transforming Education Summit, due to take place here in New York in September. The pandemic has dealt a devastating blow to the prospects of millions of learners worldwide. The summit offers a real opportunity to place education back where it belongs, in my view, at the top of the political agenda. When heads of state come to the UN in September, we need them to speak to the education system they envisage for the future and to the commitments they can make now to make this happen, including how they can integrate transformation into their own efforts to deliver recovery and accelerate SDG progress. So I'd like to end my remarks having pointed to all the challenges in a way on a more positive note, to say that really, despite the many challenges the global community faces, we have a very fervent hope for the future of the SDGs. I think the SDGs give us a roadmap to make the world a better place. Sounds like Pollyanna, but it's actually a genuine, concrete, deliverable roadmap to make the world a better place for today and tomorrow. In my work at the UN over the last 5 years, which I will soon conclude, I have absolutely been privileged to meet so many people who are so determined to follow this path to a better future. And I certainly know that everyone on the screen today joins in that commitment and in that intention. Positive change is possible through the efforts of so many of you on this call and the countless others who work every single day, unseen and often unheard, to deliver on these noble objectives. We need to maintain our determination and drive. 2030 is in sight, and I'm convinced that our shared goals remain attainable. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I wish you all the best with your excellent event this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that very informative and thoughtful keynote, and that was a wonderful beginning to our webinar. And thank you for highlighting how important discourses on early marriages, child mortality, and peace and humanitarian efforts can be when discussing access to quality education, and for providing an account of just where the global community and stakeholders stand on the issue of access to quality education. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Up next, we have Sister Orla Treacy. Sister Orla Treacy is a member of the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, that is the Loreto Sisters, and she is also the director of Loreto Rumbek. She has remained a constant in the community for 16 years now. She is a recipient of the 2019 International Women of Courage Award and the Hugh of Lafayette International Humanitarian Award in 2016. A link to Sister Orla Treacy's full bio is in the chat box. Sister Orla is with us today, but she has recorded a video due to an unstable internet connection. She will join us for the Q&A, and we will now proceed to the video.
I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. I'm speaking to you from our Loreto mission in Rumbek, South Sudan. Our mission is one of education, with a girls' boarding secondary school, a primary school for boys and girls, and a clinic and an internship program, amongst other projects. Rumbek is the capital town of Lake State, one of 10 states in South Sudan. We are situated right in the center of the country. When we arrived in early 2006, Southern Sudan, as it was known by then, had just signed the CPA, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. Rumbek was still a relatively small town. There was only one secondary school, and in it we found 10 girls. The rest of the students were young men and soldiers. Girl-child education in this part was a relatively new concept. We were recovering from a war, and the war seemed a bigger issue for most. The newly appointed head of the government of Southern Sudan, Salva Kiir, visited Rumbek shortly after we arrived and reminded us that we are not rebuilding Southern Sudan, but building it. It was never built. In 2011, South Sudan received its independence, but this hasn't been an easy journey for us. Today, very briefly, I want to look at our mission and explore some of the practical steps and themes that we have and how we have taken to promote gender equality in our quality education. The first theme we look at is the area of teachers. Aside from the fact that most teachers in South Sudan are not qualified, we also have very few female teachers. Statistics suggest that 12% of teachers are female. I'm not sure. We support a teacher training initiative for primary teachers in our neighbouring county every Saturday. Among the 158 teachers and 59 female applicants from all over the country. The average mark at mathematics was 16%, and the average in English was 29%. Within maths, a fifth of the candidates scored below 5%. 22 of the girls failed to even get 1 mark. And regarding English, remember it's our national language, and yet in this basic test, 49 students got a mark below 10%. The same exam was offered to candidates who wanted to join the boys' secondary school in LaSalle. Their averages were significantly higher in English and mathematics. So what's our solution? We could fill our school with the best performers, from girls who come from the better schools or families who can afford to support them. But what of the girls who are suffering in villages where their teachers never went to secondary school, or girls who have to work at home and never get time to study? We now offer a foundation class, a transition year to ensure female representation from many counties and states as possible. Those too weak to begin the first year have 1 year to revise the basics. While initially this was not popular with the girls as they felt they were repeating, it has become widely accepted. Our 4th theme is the issue of family commitment. While internationally we now recognise forced marriage as a modern-day slavery, sadly it's still a very common reality for us in South Sudan. It is estimated that up to 9% of 15-year-old girls are married, and that between 48 and 52% are married by the age of 18. Again, I would consider this conservative figures in some areas. An old statistic from the UN, which I believe is still true, is that a 15-year-old girl is more likely to die in childbirth than to complete secondary school. In our early years of operation, many of our girls were forced out of school for early and forced marriage. As the girls gained more confidence in their education and in us, they began to trust us more, and now these girls will speak if there is a challenge of forced marriage. But how did we do it? The solution was that we involved all stakeholders in this. Now parents must sign an agreement with us that they will ensure and protect the girl's right to complete her education and will not force her out for marriage. This agreement is signed in the presence of the local chief and supported by government. We've had some great success with these contracts. However, it's not always easy. It requires a strong and determined 16-year-old girl to be able to stand up against her own family's peer pressure. Our compound is now open 365 days a year, so the girls, when they go for their holidays, can return to school if the threat of marriage is made real. The issue of forced marriage is a daily challenge. Currently, we are dealing with 3 active cases in the compound. Another theme is the access to water. When we opened the primary school, we saw another reality in the community. That's the number of girls who miss school, and they miss for various reasons. The top 2 reasons are: number 1, home duties. Young girls are expected to carry water, collect firewood, look after their younger siblings, cook, and be generally responsible for their homes. Number 2, the older girls miss because during their periods they don't have access to pads. The reality of our schools in South Sudan are that half of them are educated under trees. 97% of schools have no access to electricity. Half of them have no toilets, and 64% have no drinking water. So what was our solution? Well, aside from building classrooms and toilets, together with the local community, we explored ways to provide water points in areas closer to girls' homes to reduce the amount of time they would spend carrying water. Today we have 8 new water points within 15 kilometres of the compound. In giving the water, the parents were asked to permit the girls to study more and attend school. There's been some improvement in this, but still girls are more likely to fail exams than the boys due to their domestic chores. For the clinic, it offers access to sanitary towels, while the tailoring teacher gives lessons on making reusable pads. Today we now boast of a daily attendance of over 95% of students. So what did all this mean to us during COVID? Well, if you put all of the earlier points together, you'll get a picture of how we operated. Many of our interns work in the clinic and continue afterwards to study medicine and healthcare at university. When the universities closed, these graduates came back to work with us. 8 water points that we have in the village served as the local schools for healthcare and education. Each morning, a team of graduates went out to these boreholes with soap and demonstrated how to wash hands and what COVID was. The schools were closed, but the convent still acted as a refuge for girls fleeing early and forced marriage. The clinic opened its doors to the community, taking up to 300 consultations each day. Ironically, during that time, we also became the #1 vaccination centre for infants, and this continues up to date with over 70 mothers bringing their children to the clinic each week for vaccination. When the COVID vaccine came, our staff were 100% compliant in receiving the vaccine. Our journey of education goes from babies to old ladies, and it continues today. It's lovely to talk with you this morning. Helena will share more on the lived reality and the impact of education for herself in South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that enlightening address, Sister. And this would be a good time to think about Sister's address and see just how intimately SDGs 4 and 5, that are the ones focusing on quality education and gender equality, and the two of the foci of this year's HLPF are related, and just how often young girls face the double brunt of both their gender and their age, especially in developing communities. Thank you so much for that address, Sister. Once again, I would request the listeners to drop their questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of their screens, and we will try to have your questions answered by our speakers at the end of the webinar. Up next, we have Father Benigno P. Beltran SVD. Father Benigno P. Beltran is a member of the Society of the Divine Missionary Order. For over 30 years, he worked with slum dwellers on Smoky Mountain in Tondo, while at the same time teaching theology in the SVD faculty and elsewhere. He is the CEO or the Chief Empowerment Optimist of Veritas Social Empowerment Inc. Father's full bio will be posted in the chat box soon, and in that while, Father, you have the floor.
Good evening. I am Father Benigno Beltran from the Philippines, Society of the Divine Word. I was an electronics engineer before I became a priest. So for the empowerment of women and for inclusive education, we heavily lean on technology. My message for you today is new wine skins, as the Lord told us. The world has changed. First industrial revolution 200 years ago, now it's the fourth industrial revolution with artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain technology. So in this context, the Sandiwaan Center for Learning focuses on educating out-of-school youth. In the Philippines, only 4 of those who enroll in K+12 will finish high school. So there are about 10 to 12 million. We do not know after the pandemic how many 15 to 29 years old. We're not counting even the 30 plus. And we get students also who are 30 years old plus. So in the face of a new understanding of the universe from Einstein, you know, that it's a huge universe, it's one, it's all connected, and it's dynamic, it is evolving. We fashioned a new educational philosophy and also included insights from quantum physics relevant to the kids, because now the kids are in a situation described as VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So our pedagogy is learning to think and thinking to learn. We're very strong on mindfulness and metacognition. And we have, next please. partnered with the Department of Education for school dropouts. It's called the ALS, Alternative Learning System, to reach out to the millions of young people who have not finished high school. So we concentrate on the digital transformation of learning. Next, please. So from the educational philosophy, we wanted something, a theory of learning that will integrate, converge learning objectives, learning activities, and learning assessments. We call it the convergence theory of learning. It is values-based. The values are integrity, self-actualization, second, solidarity, relationships, and third is creativity. So we, in our lessons, the learning objective should end in kids having these values so that they will become better human beings and they will be able to build a better world. So the convergence theory of learning is really input, process, output. Next, please. So the input is multimodal mentoring, metacognition, and motivation. We need kids to be driven to learn. They are driven to play video games until 2 o'clock in the morning. We would like them to be driven also using new methods and using technology so that they will use the same passion to learn quadratic equations and syntax and grammar in English. So at the core of the convergence theory of learning, values. As a theologian, I can root this in belief in the Trinity. And our focus in the process is to develop 3 ways of thinking: systems, critical, and design thinking that will end in integrity, solidarity, creativity. That is the holistic understanding of a new theory of learning in the light of a new understanding of the cosmos after Einstein and in the light of the uncertainty principle in quantum physics. That is the world that the kids are living in now. They are connected, but they are alone. Many of them suffer from emotional distress. Second, they distrust authority. Third, they are burdened with overchoice. They do not know what to do with their lives. So they just indulge in social media, sometimes in the Philippines, 10 hours a day. Our young people are #1 in social media all over the world. So we need new ways of thinking, new wine skills. Next, please. So the challenge is, especially during the pandemic, the ALS learners, the school dropouts, are disconnected. They do not know, like any Generation J, what to do with their life. And the teachers who were trained in a different pedagogy, purely information transfer, merely exercising the memory, will have a hard time talking to these kids. They are not so prone to being talked to with lectures for a long time. They want to be interactive. They want to use their digital device. Next, please. So these are our kids. Slum areas in Tondo, one of the biggest slums in the world. And in the middle of the slums, these are kids using iPads and accessing through a learning management system our digitized modules in STEM, and there are even modules on employment skills training. And we have partnered with Microsoft. We can certify these kids as Microsoft Office specialists, learning Word and Excel and PowerPoint. Next, please. So these are the teachers before. They do not have classrooms. They go to the houses of the kids, gather them together in the houses or wherever. Then they give them the printed modules, which cost a lot to print. Now, the kids, most of them have cell phones, 94% at least in the urban area. They can use their cell phones. If they have a signal, they can access using our username and password the lessons that these teachers were giving them before. Thus, entering into the world because they are digital natives and also lessening the chances of being infected. Next, please. So the goal is to connect these dropouts to peers, mentors, and teachers in their learning using educational technology. The second is to give them resources like we have a partnership with Khan Academy, we have partnership with other OER resources, and to submit evidence of learning, they have to use our learning management system so that they can prove that they arrive at mindful learning, deeper understanding, and long-term retention. So we also create a community of learners, especially with the kids who have a lot of digital communities in their social media platforms. Next, please. So this is what I would like to share with you, that we are moving towards the digital transformation of learning, and we can no longer go back to the instruction-centered, teacher-centered pedagogy in the past. So before it was directed by an educator, now it's student-centered and collaborative learning also. The learning approach was passive and planned. Now it is active, even interactive and on demand. The teacher mainly lectured. Now the teacher is a mentor, a coach, a guide in the community of learners. The learning pace is fixed a class. Now it's open and adaptive. The unit of content was the course. Now it is a concept or a skill. We are stressing competencies. Then the progress tracking was through testing, true or false, multiple choices. Now it's applied usage and peer evaluation. Before it was only the classroom. Now 24/7 they could access our digitized modules in English, science, and math anywhere, as long as there is a signal. So the role of technology before was just content delivery and testing. Now it is virtual, co-created, participative learning environment. So now we just finished making a learning experience platform, preparing them for the metaverse. We have lessons already. We are crafting lessons for virtual reality and augmented reality. Next, please. So this is what we are doing now. We have been funded. We were given a grant of $200,000 by the DepEd, the Department of Education, Alternative Learning Systems, and that's why we are able to do this. To enter the world of the kids, using game-based learning, using artificial intelligence to track. So now, our teachers can teach 100 kids because they are only guides, and I do not mean only, because they are more needed now as guides and mentors, because the digital world is a jungle. So teachers are more needed now. Next, please. So this is what we are doing for the ALSA learners, structured progress and learning activities, create a group of volunteer mentors also. The teachers can teach a lot more students because we have mentors for each student, volunteer mentors. So we also review them because in order to get their high school diploma, they have to pass the equivalency exam like the GED in the United States. Next, please. I think there's a lot more slides, but I might take the time of others. This is the last that I'm going to say. This is high flex learning. They could study online. They could have blended learning, and they could also fully online learning. And so we are hoping that the government will help us provide more free Wi-Fi to the kids, provide cheap digital devices so that our vision, 10 million school dropouts getting high school diploma certified by Microsoft in 2030 in fulfillment of Sustainable Development Goal number 4. And we will have Angelica Solomon, one of our graduates. We have helped hundreds of young people finish school and get jobs. We hope this will become millions with help from all over the place. Please help us pray that we will be able to reach out to more kids with our system, with our new educational philosophy, with our new theory of learning, and with our new method of teaching digital natives who cannot live without their cell phones. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Father, for talking about the Sandhiwan Center for Learning and how it is preparing young people from underprivileged backgrounds for the complex world of 21st century technology, and just how to combine the philosophy of mindfulness with the principles of critical thinking, systems design and design thinking. This would also be a good time to think about the intersection of quality education with the SDG 17, which focuses on developing partnerships and is another one of the SDGs under review this year. The Sandhiwan Learning Center's collaboration with the Department of Education, Microsoft, and several other OER resources shows just how we can localize and contextualize the opportunities and platforms offered by national and global stakeholders so that they benefit the underprivileged communities in our own countries. Thank you so much for that presentation. Up next, we have Helena Rial Isaac. Miss Helena Rial Isaac is a graduate of Loreto Rumbeck. She is among one of the first women from her community to complete secondary school and go to university. Helena holds a degree in Sustainable Human Development from the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. A link to Helena's full bio is in the chat box. We will also play a pre-recorded video from her for the same reason of her having an unstable internet connection, but she will be joining us for the Q&A, so drop your questions in the chat box. Can we have the video now?
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to participate in this event. First and foremost, I would like to recognize the presence of the invited guests, the panelists, and everyone that is participating in this forum. My name is Helena Rial Isaac. I graduated in Loreto Girls Secondary School in 2017. And after Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to participate in this event. First and foremost, I would like to recognize the presence of the invited guests, the panelists, and everyone that is participating in this forum. My name is Helena Rial Isaac. I graduated in Loreto Girls Secondary School in 2017. And after passing the national examination well, I was able to get a scholarship where I went to pursue a degree in sustainable human development in Nairobi, Kenya. I graduated last year and now I am back to Loreto where I work as a program assistant. In relation to the sustainable development goals, it's true that investing in girl child education in South Sudan is one of the best ways to empower and equip them to contribute to the development of their families and communities. As we speak today, education remains a dream for many young women in South Sudan. Many girls do not have the opportunity to go to school compared to men in South Sudan. The literacy rate for women in South Sudan is very low, and the country has fewer girls going to school than any country in the world. One of the main reasons to high illiteracy is a result of our culture, particularly the Dinka culture, where young girls are a source of wealth. In a family of 6 girls, they would always say that that family is rich because if one girl is married with 100 cows or 200 cows, then they would bring more wealth to the family. Many young girls find themselves in forced and early marriages because of their relatives' pursuit for wealth. This in the past years has favored boy child education, therefore hindering most of the women from education. In addition, poverty is also one of the reasons to why many young girls dreaming for education are not able to go to school. I call myself lucky because my parents allowed me to go to school. Yes, it wasn't just a mere decision from them, but it was based on the experience they had after marrying off my elder sister to a very old man at the age of 15 years. She could not get all the support from her husband because he had so many wives and many children to take care of. My sister returned to the responsibility of my parents, and therefore my parents decided to allow me and the rest of my siblings to study, and so that we do not come back as a burden to them. Besides, I was also determined, and my intellectual ability made it possible for me to be given a chance to study. The truth is, it wasn't an easy journey for me. I went through a lot before I finally made it. In my early life, especially during the intercommunal fights, most of the young women were victims, and that include even the national wars. I remember in 2011, where there was a serious fight between my community and our neighboring community. The school was closed down. I know it affected both young boys and girls, but when the school reopened, only a few girls came back to school, while the rest were married off. Most of the girls were married even when they were in primary 4, 5, and 6. During my entire education, the resources for my education wasn't in the hand of my parents. And I would say if my parents were to contribute to my education in terms of money, I don't think I would have graduated, but through the help of good Samaritans, especially the missionaries who saw my ability, made it possible for me to finish my education. And besides that, many men also came to propose to my parents to marry me, but I kept rejecting the idea. Right now, I am among the first 3 young women who managed to hold bachelor's degree in my community. And I am also the first secondary school graduate and university graduate in my family. Being education is very important, and I can see how I have been transformed compared with those who never went to school. Education has given me a position in my family. Right now, I am like a focal point in my family, particularly when there is any important decision to be made. In South Sudan, women are not included in any decision making, but because I am educated and I can make well-informed decisions, I'm respected and always included in the decision-making process. I have the ability to support and also encourage the girls in my village to go to school. Many young girls have been able to approach me asking how they wish to be like me and also seek advice from me. Through education, I am able to know my rights, fight for my rights, and also act as a voice to the voiceless. Our community treats women as lesser humans, but education has given me the knowledge to understand that I am not for sale, but I am much more valuable and also have the right to choose whom I want to marry, not for wealth, but for the long-term commitment. I am also equipped as an active citizen, shaping the future of my siblings, family, and societies. Right now, I am able to motivate, encourage, and support my sibling and the rest of my family members to go to school. It is through education I am able to get a job or my expertise. I know there are many people who might have made it in life without education, but I truly believe that the environment also had an impact on them. Dinka culture environment can never allow a woman to grow and work without education. It's only through education that most of the women are discovering their rights and also helping the most marginalized to fight for their rights. Yes, through Loreto Rumbek, more than 300 young women have already managed to graduate in secondary school, and more than 90% go to the university, and some have already graduated and working. They are the caretakers, the breadwinners, and the decision makers in their family. Loreto Rumbek gave me security because I could see many girls who studied in other schools end up being forced to marry. But Loreto has always been our safe house, where any parent who wants to marry off their daughter cannot get the chance. The presence of qualified teachers in Loreto Rumbek gave me a quality education that any young woman in this country could not get. And I like this quote from Nelson Mandela, the most prominent and former president of South Africa. He stated that education is the great engine of personal development. It's through education that a daughter of a peasant can become a doctor, that the son of a mine worker can become the head of the mine, that a child of a farm worker can become the president of a great nation. I am also grateful that Loreto was able to unite my power to lead, protect, and to speak. Thank you, and I wish you a blessed day.
Thank you so much, Helena, for sharing your account with us, and your journey and determination truly inspires us all. Once again, Helena's reflection is a call for us to think about the intersection of gender equality and access to quality education. Conflict and displacement only exacerbate this inequality, and lack of education only disables individuals, especially women and girls, from making informed decisions about their bodies and their lives. Once again, thank you so much, Helena. You truly are a role model to all of us. Up next, we have Maria Angelica Solomon. Maria Angelica Solomon is a graduate at the Sandiwan Center for Learning, Philippines. She has a bachelor's degree in hotel and restaurant management and is currently employed at Bread Talk. A link to Maria's full bio is in the chat box. Once again, we will play a pre-recorded video of Maria Angelica. Unfortunately, she is unable to join us for the Q&A session as well due to challenges and access to the internet.
I am Maria Angelica L. Solomon, 36 years of age, a passer and a graduate of the Alternative Learning System from Sandiwaan Center for Learning last 2015. I grew up in the famous garbage dump called Smoky Mountain, from the heart of the slum area in Tondo, Manila. It was a place where most of the people were digging, collecting, and ravaging garbage to find things to sell or recycle, to have money to buy food, to eat, and to play necessary things to survive. When I was in high school, I didn't have the chance to finish due to peer pressure among my classmates and because we were facing financial problems at that time. When my father passed away, my mother took all the responsibilities to take care of me and all of my siblings. It was also around this time when I was badly influenced by the wrong people with vices. Due to these reasons, I was not able to pursue my studies. The Sandiwaan Center for Learning introduced us to the ALS program, where undergraduate like me can attain a high school diploma and finish junior high school. It is a non-stop, non-profit, and non-government organization that aims to deliver basic and technical education to the poor and underprivileged young youth and adults. They initiated a radical approach to getting more of these youth to gain access to learning opportunities through non-formal community-based education program. This project provides computer-based interactive, multimedia learning resources that will be the primary source of instruction. This material will correspond to the prescribed curriculum modules of the Department of Education, Accreditation, and Equivalency Program. Through this, I was able to continue my studies and pass the AME exam and continue to college. Luckily, I am a member of an environmental dance group called Mga Anak ni Inang Daigdig or Children of Mother Earth, an environmental performing arts group featuring young people and children who were born and grew up in Smoky Mountain. This rigorous and disciplined group of performing artists have been issuing a collective call to commitment through the dance and rituals of indigenous people from the Philippines to protect God's creation and to inspire people to treat each other as brothers and sisters. They train and teach us to be disciplined dance partners and to raise environmental awareness. Through the help of our group, I continue my college studies as they supported my school expenses. In 2020, I graduated with a degree of Bachelor of Science in Hospitality Management, major in Culinary Arts in Eulogio Amang Rodriguez Institute of Science and Technology, and I'm currently working as a pastry baker in Bread Talk. I want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and thankful to my arts instructor, Sir Antonio Macalalag and Sir Andrew Macalalag, for their patience and dedication in teaching us, and also to our administrator, Ms. Nerissa Beltran, and most especially to our Executive Director, Reverend Father Benigno P. Beltran SVD, for believing in people like me. There are more than 10 million Filipinos 15 to 29 years old who have not finished high school. I would like to ask the Department of Education in the Philippines to increase the budget for the ALS program so that they can have the same chance I got. I also pray that the use of computer-based learning like the one promoted by the Sandiwaan Center for Learning will receive more assistance. Digital education can give a woman fighting chance because we can be equal or even be better than the boys in using the keyboard to learn and prepare for the future. We should never stop dreaming, as there are a lot of people out there that believe in our potential and they are willing to offer a helping hand. Thank you and mabuhay ang alternative learning system.
We thank Maria Angelica for contributing to today's webinar by sharing the role of education in her journey. Her story and lived experience is an example of how truly transformative education and technical learning can be, especially in underprivileged communities and to young women and girls around the world. Now that all of our speakers have presented, we will finally move to the Q&A section of today's webinar. Before we proceed to the Q&A section, I would like to thank everyone who presented at today's webinar, and I would like to express just how helpful and impactful your contributions have been. You truly have left us a lot to think about. The first question that we have, and this question is open to all the speakers present here today. What role will technology play in the evolution of education? What is your greatest concern about the growing online education movement, and how can communities with lesser digital resources keep up with this movement? The speakers have the floor now.
I think, yeah, good afternoon. I think we're not great at talking about technology because we, as I mentioned earlier, most of our schools don't have electricity. Our internet is sparse. So I think that this question is probably better for Father Benigno and his team. We're still an emerging country and we're just recovering from war. So we're still at ground zero in many ways. Thank you for the question.
I would like to answer the question. I think we should start with changing the mindset. Because if we place old pedagogies and methods of teaching in a new situation, we will have a hard time. So I think we should work together for a new educational philosophy. I think we should work together for a new educational philosophy that is appropriate for the situation today. And then, no matter what problems we have, we lack connectivity. Talk to Elon Musk, for example. We lack digital devices. Where I gave out thousands of used digital devices from the United States and from Germany because we needed it. So we made a campaign. So I could not presume to answer for every situation, but I think we should try our best to really craft a new educational philosophy that is appropriate for each situation, but also looking at kids as digital natives. Because we are in Islam area, we do not have strong connectivity, where people do not have tablets, but I think you just have to be persistent and driven because Caritas Christi urget nos.
If I could just come in quickly from the UN perspective to note that the Transforming Education Summit that Ambassador Byrne Nason mentioned in her keynote, one of the focus areas of that summit will be on digital learning. And the pattern that we're seeing now, and particularly in the context of COVID, is that technological innovation is actually increasing rather than reducing inequality globally, and that is undermining progress to the SDGs. And I think, Sister Orla, your comment goes to the heart of it, that you're not in a position to really speak to this because of the point you're at in terms of infrastructure. And that is the fundamental issue that will need to be addressed for this to move forward. And, it's admirable, like Father Beltran said, to be doing what can be done, but it needs to be done in a much more systematic way at the global level to make sure that we address the digital divide and don't make things worse as the world moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Tracy, Father Benigno, and Mr. Gilroy for those responses. Up next, we have a question which has been raised by several participants in the webinar, so I'm just going to try to sum it up and ask it as one single question. The question is about the intersection of disability rights and access to quality education. What can our organizations locally, regionally, or globally do to make quality education more accessible to people with disabilities?
Good afternoon again. Let me start, if I may. Our context in South Sudan, it's a luxury to be educated. We have about 3 to 4% of girls who have the chance to go to secondary school, and it's not much higher for boys in areas. So to have a disability, it is also to bring you into another marginalized group. For us on the compound, we have several girls and boys in our primary school who also have disabilities. But there are very practical realities. For example, for them to travel from their home to school, 2 of them are in wheelchairs. We don't have roads. So in the rainy season, many of them have to be carried. So while we can provide the wheelchair accessibility, the toilets, our country is not yet at that stage where we can really recognize education for all. We're struggling, but I think within our community, we do what we can.
Thank you so much. Would any of the other speakers want to take that up?
I would like to answer that also. First, we are going into the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. They have been devastated by war, and the situation is not that much different. Their houses were razed, and they have no connections. We will try our best. We are there. We signed an agreement with the Muslims in the south of the Philippines so that we can provide inclusive education that is structured according to digital technologies. Second, we are also working with blind people. They use computers to, there is an app that will make sound from the keyboard letters. They are composing songs and selling them online. And third, the interactive lessons that we made, they were built by deaf programmers. A special course for deaf people, and then they learned how to program. They learned how to do animation. So the deaf, the blind, even those who have been victimized by war and their relatives were killed, they have not gone to school for a long time. We are trying to help them so that we can fulfill SDG number 4. And we are concentrating on women like Maria Angelica Solomon also, because they are, the economic system is organized for the males, you know. So if they are given digital opportunities, most of the time they are better than the boys and the men. Why? They are faster at the keyboards. So if we have data encoding project, they are very, very fast in most women. And second, they are also very patient in making hundreds of them. I gave jobs making microchips from a Korean American company, and they are more patient. Women are more patient in doing digital jobs. So most of them were retained. All the boys went away. They were not as patient as the ladies.
Could I come in quickly, Ria? Just when Father Beltran mentioned blindness, Ireland sponsored another HLPF event last week focusing on the intersection between eye health and education. And we were kind of focusing on preventable blindness. And some of the information that came out of that discussion, 50% of blindness in children can be prevented or treated with something, most often with nothing more than a pair of glasses. And effective interventions at an early stage can reduce the odds of failing a class by up to 44%. And the adoption of and implementation of health promoting policies in the school context can provide the comprehensive eye health care needed by millions of children and support inclusive and equitable education for all. So, a school can be, and Sister Orla touched on this as well about the health aspects of their work, that something as simple as giving children access to eye care will keep them in school, can boost their educational attainment, and then in turn strengthen implementation of the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. Thanks.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers for answering this question. Up next, we have a question about the Secretary General's Transforming Education Summit. And because we have several questions, once again, I would try to, make it into one question that all our speakers can answer. The UN Secretary General's Transforming Education Summit this September is bound to bring forth crucial policy reforms, policy suggestions about education in general. What would you say to the UN member states as to what needs to be done to transform education for the future? Or in case, what would you expect from the stakeholders at this summit in terms of policy recommendations or suggestions? What do you want the outcome of the summit to be?
I might come in there quickly. It's probably more in my expertise, but in terms of what is hoped for the summit, the key thing is that it's not about making the existing system better or improving things around the edges. It's about really understanding the need to do as the title suggests, a transformation in terms of how education is delivered, and that there's a universality to it as well. This isn't something that is for developing countries only. It's not only in the context of wealthy countries providing aid, that we all need to look at how we develop our education systems. And there's been 5 action tracks identified. I've mentioned a couple of them, but the first one is inclusive, equitable, safe and healthy schools. The second is learning and skills for life, work and sustainable development. It's something that Geraldine spoke about in her address earlier on. The third track is about teachers and the teaching profession and how we empower educators to deliver. The fourth is what I touched on in the previous question, but on digital learning and transformation. And the fifth is financing, which is obviously key. So what we need, unusually for a UN process, is that this is meant to go beyond the diplomats here in New York, that we describe ourselves as experts on human rights or experts on sustainable development, but oftentimes we aren't. That's just a title. So the key focus of the Transforming Education Summit approach has been national consultations, so that member states are actually discussing internally with the departments of education, with their education stakeholders about what needs to be done, and then bringing the results of those consultations and plans back to the UN in September, and moving away from negotiating a very long, worthy text here at the UN and actually cutting to the chase and talking to the people that need to affect change and have the ideas and the expertise to do so. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that response. Would any of the other speakers want to take this up?
There are measures for the SDGs, women empowerment and inclusive, equitable education. I think we should review that and see how we can improve. How can we measure the success? Because we are saying by 2030, all SDGs should be achieved. That was the vision. Where are we now? And where should we go? That's what I would like. That's the message I would like to give the participants of the assembly.
Thank you so much, Father. So we have one more question, which is based on one of the running themes in the Q&A box. And the question is about the intersection of the rights of refugees and internally displaced persons and quality education. So we have heard a lot about how conflict and violence only exacerbates the existing inequalities and injustices in the education systems. And education can protect refugee children and youth from forced recruitment into armed groups, child labor, sexual exploitation, and child marriages. So in this case, how can we put more robust education systems or provisions in place that can enable education, a continuous education to refugee children and youth, or the youth and the refugee children in, the section of internally displaced persons? How can we go about that?
Some of our missionaries were working with refugees before, and they plan not to put internet connections in the refugee camps and then teach the kids using educational technology. But there was no support. I think that's the only hope. So that the kids, once they have the device, no matter where they go, they could still continue learning, just like our guys, where no matter where they are, they could access the lessons, and then there are mentors teaching them. Otherwise, I see no way out. If the situation is volatile, they do not know what tomorrow will bring. So what I am proposing is, as much as possible, as much as the situation can bear, provide digital devices to the kids, create content that will be engaging to them, use game-based learning, and then teach the teachers how to do a modern way of teaching digital natives. That's the only way that I can see, because we are also, as I said, we're working with refugees from the war between the Muslims and the Christians in the south of the Philippines.
And I think just to note as well that something that is often the case in the context of people who are fleeing conflict, IDPs and refugees, that education is seen as somehow as a luxury, that it isn't an immediate need that has to be provided. And, to an extent in terms of food and shelter, that's correct. But so many of the conflicts that we're dealing with and seeing globally are so entrenched that you're going to have children living in this vulnerable situation for the duration of their educational lifetime. And we need to be realistic about that and put in place the basic education services, at least, that are needed in this context, and not fail those children. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, John. Again, I suppose our situation is quite unique, and we are at ground zero. One of the challenges that we have a huge internally displaced population and refugee situation in neighboring countries. The education provided to people in the camps is better than the education provided at home. So the difficulty is how to bring people back. We have a number of students here. They came, it's a boarding school, they came from other states. Violence erupted, their families have now shifted to camps. They have chosen to stay with us, but their siblings will now say that they're getting better education because of the situation. So it's a difficult, it's something very difficult to talk about, because our country is at a very different stage to other countries. But I think we have to critically look at the partnerships that we have with aid agencies and how we can boost education for everybody. I mean, our country at the moment, we have 10% of women who are teachers. And if you look at the quality of our teachers, they're very poor. So how do you break that and make it into transformative education? I mean, we have a long way to go. And if we're not willing to invest in all areas and all sectors of our community, we're not going to benefit really.
Thank you so much for those insights. And with that, we come to the end of our Q&A section. Some of the questions are still there in the Q&A box, and if any of the speakers would like to answer those, please go ahead and type in your responses in the Q&A box itself. Before we move on to the closing statement, would any of the speakers like to say, to address the audience one last time?
I'm only inviting everyone who listen, that we can come together also and discuss how we can bring this forward, so that it will not be sharing. It should be a learning thing also, a learning activity that we could learn from South Sudan. Our missionaries are there. I think they just left because one of them had a hard time. So a community of learners also. All of us doing this should bring this forward until 2030 at least, so that we could learn from each other and then bring it forward. That's what I would like to suggest. I would like to share also, because I did not finish my slides. You can ask the organizers, and then if you have some comments, you could just email me at Beltran SVD yahoo.com, so that you can critique and we can fine-tune our theory of learning, convergence theory of learning, and our way of approach, so that we can arrive at equitable and inclusive education, and also empower women through digital technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate being a part of this event today. And what I just would like to say is that I appreciate those who are also sending their contribution to South Sudan, especially for young girls in South Sudan. And the work you're doing is really great. As you have listened to me today, a large number of young women in South Sudan, they are really in need of this education. And we truly appreciate, and I hope that the people who are organizing the SDGs to send their development agencies to South Sudan to help young women and also young boys, because it's not, South Sudan is not only girls that are suffering, but even the young boys are also suffering. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, just a big thank you
with
from the Irish Mission perspective. We were delighted to have been part of the discussion today. This is a really vital part of what the HLPF is to take the information from the field to the policy level here in New York. And Ambassador Byrne Nason was really honored to be invited to be the keynote today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all our speakers for joining us here today and for contributing your effort and your time to making your presentations so accessible and informative for all our listeners. With that, we will move on to the closing statement for today's webinar. I hand the mic over to Sister Janet Walbrooks.
On behalf of Cynthia, Paul Ramach from Vivid International, Beth Blissman from Loreto Community, and Anthony Hannon from Mary Ward International Ireland, your hosts today. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. It is great to see many of us invested in the SDGs. As the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina J. Mohammed, said at the opening of the HLPF, the SDGs are our responsibility, our collective responsibility. We are all accountable. We would also like to thank our keynote speaker, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason, for reminding us that 7 years later, we are not at the halfway point in achieving the SDGs. And yet, there is hope. Our special thanks to our inspiring panelists, Sister Orla Treacy IBVM, Father Benigno P. Beltran SVD, Helena Rial Isaac, and Maria Angelica Solomon for their generosity and for demonstrating through their experiences the important linkages of the SDGs, particularly access to quality education, gender equality, and working in partnership with local and global stakeholders. We greatly appreciate your passion, energy, and commitment. And of course, I would also like to thank John Gilroy for staying on and joining our panelists at the Q&A. Thank you so much. We hope that everyone will leave here today feeling hopeful, energized, and inspired in the knowledge that together we can advocate and act to achieve the SDGs. To end, let me again quote Deputy Secretary General Amina, "Let's get to work."